Hey y'all. So today we've got Iyslander versus Briar, and let's get into it. Opponent won the die roll and chose to go first. So in our opening hand we have Blizzard, which means that if our opponent tries to go wide, like they start with like a Rabble or something, I definitely just use the Blizzard straight away. Because, I mean, the card doesn't block, so use it straight away and like you get your value out of it. Like you potentially get your value out of it if they don't like have a blue. So that's what I'm looking at. We do have a red Ice Bolt, so we're hoping to try and keep that going into our turn. Like, having a red to send back when you're going second is pretty important when you're Iyslander. To be honest, I haven't completely... Every time, like, this time my opponent won the die roll and chose to go first, but every time I win, I still get torn about whether I want to go first or second. Like, obviously, like, going first, you can potentially have, like, the Insidious Chill high roll, where you just get to set it up for free. But since we are like on the tempo game plan, like there is an argument for going second. Because if you don't get that high roll of getting a setup in Insidious Chill, sometimes it can feel really bad. Especially if opponents on like AB3 and like you can't like leak damage in. So yeah, do get torn about that sometimes. And it's all our opponent did was swing Thorn. Something a lot of Briar players like do sometimes. It's like when they go first, they're like, oh, let me activate Grasp. And I'm like, wait, you don't have Grasp. And it's like, they're like, oh crap, yeah, you're right. Happens a lot, actually. It's kind of funny. So yeah, we drew into another red, so that means the only viable Arsenal target we have is the D-React, which I don't mind. I think I do bring in like 5 D-Reacts into Briar. It's just very useful to like stop their snatch or like the Force of Nature and do something like, so some of the on-hits, like Coax a Commotion, stuff like that, you know, you don't want to let that hit, so I do like the D-Reacts for that case. Okay, and then we draw into 3 reds. Not fun, obviously. Opponent starts with a Bramble Spark. So looking at this hand, best thing to Arsenal is Cold Snap. I'm not sure if we can get there. So I think my best line would probably be don't use my Arsenal this turn and just try and keep 2 cards, which is the CNC and the blue, and just try and send a CNC at my opponent. Or I can block with all the reds and Arsenal Cold Snap. Those are 2 options, depending on what my opponent does. So we're going for a Scar, which actually has Go again, which is wild, given that it's Briar against Iyslander. That rarely happens. Another option that we have is that we can actually, yeah, I was just gonna say this, we can sink one of these reds to try and like get a better hand. That's the other thing that Sync can do. Obviously bails you out of like your all red hands, like potentially bails you out. Obviously I could draw another red. Aether Hail's the most useless card of all of these, so probably Sync that. Yeah, the other thing about like using Sync on the first attack, like I know this isn't on hit like a Snatch or a Coax, and of course using it here sort of leaves me open to like a Snatch, but the good thing about using it here is that it's sort of, I do play around Exude, and I know a lot of Briars are running Exude nowadays, so having the Sync in Arsenal and then if my opponent follows it in Exude, that's really bad, and they do, so you know, we did get rewarded there. Another thing is that, I mean, typically I'm pretty, like, Briars like to, you know, play like the 2 non-attacks first. So if they were gonna play another non-attack and then snatch, they probably would have played 2 non-attacks first. I feel like that happens a lot. Like if they had it, like they probably would have they would have started with the Scar, Go again, and then use the non-attacks to buff the snatch. Like, so that's like a read you potentially can make. That the fact that they did Bramble Spark into Scar probably means they don't have an on-hit that they are threatening that turn. Because if they did, they would rather have the buff from Bramble Spark go on the on-hit rather than, you know, the Scar for a Scar. So that was the reason why I use a Sync below on the Scar itself. And then we just block with the CNC since we drew into a blue. So now we have the option to Arsenal the Cold Snap. So I can just send this Ice Vein. Fuse it. So yeah, there was an option to block with the Ice Vein instead, and then just send the CNC. But my opponent does have an embodiment. Well, there's 2 reasons. My opponent has an embodiment, so the CNC potentially can get blocked out. The other thing is that if I CNC and they take it, then my Arsenal Cold Snap is not very useful, because it's not like potentially freezing the Arsenal. So I much prefer this line where I'm guaranteeing them at least leaking some damage because I can't block this out. Get a card from the hand, and upon the embodiment popping, I make them pay if they want to use the Arsenal this turn because I can just Cold Snap. Okay, so opponents actually, right, they're blocking 3, and then now they have the on-hit to deal with. And they discard the red snatch. Which is interesting, because I feel like a lot of times what people do is they'll block 1, like they'll put your blue block 1 and use the 2 floating to pay for the tax. But my opponent does this, which is probably a bit telling that they don't mind this game going long. Which means that now I'm thinking about, do I need to set up a chill? Because sometimes, depending on how your aggro opponent is playing, you may not actually need to set up a chill in the game. But if they are doing things like this, where they are trying to block out your stuff, they don't mind discarding like snatch and stuff. Well, when you do this sort of stuff, then you want to start thinking about setting up a chill at some point, potentially 2 if they're going really, really slow. But I've done that exactly once before against a Viceroy, where I actually had to set up a second chill just because of the way they were playing. Yeah, so basically the plays that my opponent made like are leading me to think that you set up a chill, and we do draw into a chill. That's nice. We draw into 2 chills, which is not very useful. Now at this point I was regretting blocking with pitching my 3 block. Although what I was envisioning was that I get to play the chill and hopefully arsenal the hypothermia. Anyway, so we go ahead and play the chill and arsenal the sink below, which is fine. Our opponent gets a 5-card hand, so that's a cost of playing out the chill here, that we gave up on a 5-card hand. But we do get to arsenal a D-reactant, so we're like, you know, somewhat, like, we have like 5 cards to block with, basically. So we feel okay. We draw into another 3 reds, which is really sad. Yeah, and then our opponent notices that we pitched a hypothermia. And at this point, because, you know, like, we on the call together, we were just chatting, at this point, they were like trying to play around hypothermia, because they made the read that since I pitched a hypothermia, then in what I arsenaled was a hypothermia. Like, which is kind of a fair read. Like, hypothermia is a huge power card against Briar, because everything except Rabble, you know, has conditional go again. So, like, pitching like, you need a very good reason to pitch hypothermia. For me, the reason was I wanted to play out the chill. But if my other card was any other blue, pretty much, except maybe Channel Lake Frigid, I would pitch that instead, and then arsenal hypothermia. So our opponent's making the read, which is, you know, is good for us. That we're sort of bluffing another hypothermia in arsenal. Right now 3 reds, obviously not great, but again we have a sink in arsenal to help us get us out of this. Or we yeah, we can just block with 2 cards and send back a CNC. Our opponent just sends Exude at us. This is partly them trying to play around hypothermia. Also note, Exude actually doesn't stop you from playing your non-attacks from your arsenal, because Exude stops instants and defense reactions, whereas non-attacks played as instants, which is what Iyslander's ability is, do not get stopped. So this is really unfortunate. Our opponent's coming at us with another Exude. Because we really wanted to sink to get out of this 3 red hand. Also, if we want to, you know, conserve life, I mean, our opponent's clearly presenting that they're going to pump this Exude a few times. That's how they want to play around what they think is a hypothermia in my arsenal. So for me to not leak too much damage and be efficient on my cards, I need to block with both red Ice Veins, and I already have 1 red Ice Vein in the graveyard. So the bad thing about that, a particularly bad thing about that, is that we sort of spent, like, we sort of gave up a bit of tempo to play the chill, and now we're blocking with our Ice Veins. So I do have 1 to 2 yellow Ice Veins instead, so that's probably something I'm going to need to rely on, and also Brain Freezes. So, you know, it's not the end of the world, because we now have more fuse targets, like with the Brain Freeze especially, and the yellow Ice Veins, but it does feel really, really bad. Yep, so we go ahead and just block 6. And our opponent pumps it twice, brings up to 8, and we just take 2. So, yeah. But now we have no more red Ice Veins in the deck, so we're going to need to figure out other ways to trigger into this chill. Right, then we go with the CNC. So if opponent has, like, enough non-attacks in the hand, they could, you know, block this decently. But the thing about Briar is, like, they really need both their non-attacks and attacks. And most of the attacks actually only block 2, right? Like the Snatches, the Exudes, these all like block 2, the Rabbles. So if they only have 2 non-attacks in hand and they use both of them to block the CNC, it's unlikely that they'll have a very strong turn, because Briar's, like, if all they have is attacks in their hand, it's usually not a very strong turn. They really want to do like a Nimbalism into Rabble into Thorn kind of thing. So, you know, CNC is just very strong card into like the Rune Blades and also Fi. Alright, opponent just takes 6 and loses their Lightning Surge in Arsenal, so we are really happy about that. That was basically like 10 points of value we got from the CNC. They took 6 and they lost a free 4 damage from Arsenal, so they're very happy about that. That's the other thing. That's a cost of bringing in AB3 when you're a Runeblade particularly. You know, you don't have your Grasp, you don't have like your Crown Providence or whatever. So the CNCs just are so difficult to deal with. I particularly love like Erase Face into Viscerai. It's so incredibly strong. Okay, so I'm gonna start to Rabble, the reveal red. And we drew into yellow Ice Vein. So we really want to play it and then Arsenal the card we fuse with, which, you know, would be the Hypothermia in this case. So we're very incentivized to use our D-React here. At the same time, I do want to sort of make sure I'm playing around a potential Snatch or Coax a Commotion. So I choose not to block the Rabble. The only card I would be blocking with this time is a Brain Freeze. So honestly, I probably should have blocked the Brain Freeze, since, you know, I just at least block a little, and then I still have the D-React in Arsenal for like the 4 attack thing that I want to stop. Also, at this point, all 3 Exudes have been played, so I don't mind keeping the D-React in Arsenal. And then opponent just plays Energy Potion, banks the Energy Potion and the Embodiment of Lightning. So we got really punished for not blocking that Ravenous Rabble there. Because, yeah, we aren't using this 5-card hand. So there's a bit of punish. I should have blocked with the Brain Freeze. That was a mistake for sure. Yeah, I think blocking Brain Freeze was the play there, not using the D-React yet in case they did a 4 attack thing. In which case our turn would still be slightly inefficient, but not, you know, this level of inefficient. We basically just lost 3 points of value straight up by not blocking. Excuse me, by not blocking with the Brain Freeze. Alright, but anyway, we follow up with the yellow Ice Vein, triggering the chill. And to be honest, with the life totals being close and me still having chill chargers, I actually feel ahead at this point. Like, if you're on even life totals against the aggro deck, you just feel ahead as Iyslander because you have an extra turn with Striders. And if on top of that you have Insidious chill chargers, then you feel like even more ahead. And again, that's part of the downside of trying to be like, oh, I have AB3 and I kind of like always want to use it against Iyslander. It's like, if you play that defensive, you give them time to set up the chills. And then and you also aren't threatening their life totals, so that means like when they start triggering the chills, you're on like sort of even life totals, and then you get really far behind. So I'm not sure. I do feel like the AB3 is still the correct call. If nothing else, because it stops Blue Ice Vein. It makes Blue Ice Vein like not a live card anymore. But at the same time, I'm not sure whether aggro decks are incentivized to like always, you know, use the AB3 to like block out. It feels like, and eventually, like, the Iyslander will just leak enough, right? Like, with chills and stuff, will just leak enough that you can't... yeah, that you can't block out completely. Yeah, so opponent, what they did, they paid 2 for the chill, and then blocked 2 on the yellow Ice Vein, and then used the 2 floating, because they pitched 2 blues, to pay for the tax. And then I also follow with a Waning Moon, because obviously, like, our hand was like that. Okay, then opponent follows Entwine Lightning unfused, but the only reason they didn't fuse is because they already have an Embodiment of Lightning. So, you know, they could have a Lightning Press or something, or another Lightning card that there's no point them showing it to me. And we just start with the Blizzard, because we saw them pitch 2 blues the previous turn. So so I Blizzard there because I'm like doubtful that they have an extra blue. Or if they do, then I still get information. And Blizzard's not a card that blocks anyway, so I don't mind just getting rid of it here. And we have a good 2-card play here where we just Ice Bolt and Tunic out Waning Moon. So we still don't need to use a D-React until our opponent actually presents us an on-hit. And we don't mind, and we'd rather have the D-React in Arsenal compared to like a Frosting or Frostex, so yeah. Okay, and then, right, okay, so opponent didn't pay for Blizzard. And that was the key thing there. They didn't pay for Blizzard, so I knew nothing else was coming. So that's why I used the D-React on that Lightning Press over there. They used Tunic in response to the Blizzard Frostbite, and then used that 1 floating to Lightning Press, paying through the Frostbite. And because of that, I was like, okay, now I can cycle my Arsenal. Whereas if they follow with another attack, I would have just blocked with like the Frosting. and kept the D-React in there because that was the most useful card of the cards I had to keep in Arsenal. But does it get to be efficient? And we just send 7 at our opponent, which is with Ice Bolt and Tunic. That feels really good. Frosting in Arsenal isn't amazing, but you know it's fine. And then we are looking to Arsenal Cold Snap here. So and since we don't have any red to send at our opponent, what I'm looking to do is just block with my blues, which are 3 blocks, and the D-React and Arsenal Cold Snap. If I can keep an extra blue, that'll be perfect to Coronet Peak. Which is actually probably what I do. I probably block with 1 blue, D-React, and then Coronet Peak and Arsenal Cold Snap. That's what I'm looking to do with this hand. So we start with the Frosting just because your opponent hasn't shown us that they have a blue yet, so we just do it to potentially tax them if they don't have the blue, but they did, so they block and they still have 2 floating and pay through Frostbites. Another thing we can do is that that's the thing I really like about the D-Reacts in Iyslander. It's like they are as okay to Arsenal as your blues. So, you know, I can like block with a Hail and the Ice Vein, and then I could, you know, pitch the Cold Snap to Coronet Peak, Arsenal and D-React, or, you know, pitch something else to Coronet, use a D-React now, pitch a blue to Coronet Peak, Arsenal, or Cold Snap. It's like we have a lot of options here with the choice between Arsenaling the D-React or Arsenaling the Cold Snap. So I'm a fan. Okay, and then they Gloomveil, and this is coming in for 3 go again because of the embodiment. So yeah, I think over here I do decide to block with a 3 block just because if I don't block this and my opponent just goes to Arsenal, then I'm being inefficient. If I D-React this, I'm also being inefficient. So I block with a 3 block, and then my opponent does present a Snatch. So that's really awesome, because we save the D-React for that. And if they didn't, we would have pitched Cold Snap to Coronet Peak and Arsenal to D-React. So that felt good. Anyway, so we managed to get past the Snatch, and now the embodiment will pop, and we will just play the Cold Snap, because like it's still just really strong, even if it doesn't potentially freeze the Arsenal. Yeah, opponent forgot to give us our priority window, so we do the Cold Snap. We do Cold Snap plus Waning Moon. And we finally found like our first Channeling Frigid, so this is awesome because we'll be able to do the play of Ice Vein fused with Channel, and that'll also trigger the Chill. So Chill plus Ice Vein, and we get to Arsenal Channeling Frigid after that is just it's a big tempo stealing play. So we're very happy to see Channel along with an Ice Vein. All right, so opponent blocked 1 on our Waning Moon and paid through a Frostbite. So yeah, we'll just block 3 here, and then that'll be our only block this turn, because we need to keep 3 cards for Ice Vein. Yep, Fuse, Ice Vein, triggering Chill with us being able to play Channel in response to embodiment popping. All this is just very huge. This is very solid. Although our opponent does have an energy potion, so it's likely they'll still be able to threaten something through Channeling Frigid. At the same time, we are definitely taking at least 2 cards from them with Chill plus Ice Vein right now, so, you know, we are fine if they pop energy potion on like a 3-card hand. Like, you know, that's fine for us. Okay, opponent discards a red to the Chill. Okay, and then do classic block 1 on the Ice Vein and use 2 floating from the blue to pay for the effect. Yep, okay, so we drop, and our only blue ice card is the blue Hail. So if we want to keep the channel around on our turn, which obviously is something we want to do, that's something I'm looking to pitch to Coronet Peak, or pitch to the red Aether Hail, and then Arsenal the D-React. So those are the options I'm looking at. It depends on what my opponent presents to me this turn. If they present something that I feel like I need to block, then I'll block with a red Hail, and then pitch a blue Hail on my turn for Coronet Peak, and then just Arsenal the D-React. But if they don't, I'm actually very incentivized to just send the red hail at my opponent, because we're getting to the life totals where they need to be scared of just dying to Striders. So, you know, I do want to like accelerate them there. So, yeah. So anyways, our opponent's deciding whether they want to respond to the Frostbite from Channel Lake Frigid. And they do have the E-Pods. I'm expecting them to pop it here. And we'll see what they do. Yeah, okay, so they do pop the E-Pod, which helps pay for like the first zero cost thing they want to do, because it pays through Frostbite and Channel, just the two floating. Yeah, okay, and then they just do an E-Strike for 7. Use the two floating, pay for E-Strike for 7, which is good. I mean, these sort of plays are like the best thing aggro opponents can do when they're under Channel Lake Frigid. Just like one big attack is obviously a lot better, because they can't really go wide when Channel's in the field. So, like I said, we are very incentivized to just race our opponent down at this point. So, I believe I'm inclined to just take 7 here. The only reason I'll be worried about going to 2 is if I'm worried about dying to arcane damage from Thorn. But I know I'm keeping Channel up, so it's I think it's unlikely that my opponent will be able to swing Thorn for quite a while. So, yeah, especially since they will know that they kind of need to block as much as they can on the red Aether Hill. So I don't think I need to worry about that, and then I'm okay going to 2. Although the one scary thing about that play is that I'll be arsenaling a D-React, which obviously isn't an offensive thing. And typically if you're trying to close out the game, you really want to be sending like an offensive thing on your turn and their turn. D-React doesn't help with that. So yeah, that could potentially get stuck in Arsenal. That has happened to me before. In the endgame states, when an opponent starts being really conservative, they don't send that much stuff at you, and then you're like, oh, the D-React just gets stuck. Alright, so one blocks 3 on the hail, and then obviously we use it 2 floating to moon. Right, and then they just take that 2, and then we go ahead and trigger Channel on an end step. This is something you could potentially get rule sharked about at like a big event, so make sure that you trigger your Channel before you go to Arsenal. So the correct order is you say trigger Channel, you put your ice card below your deck. Don't put your other cards in a pitch zone if you have them below your deck, just put the ice cards you need to satisfy your Channel. And then you go to Arsenal, and then you put the remaining cards in your pitch zone under your deck. That is the correct order. Which, I mean, I've never gotten rule sharked about it yet. But I mean, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if someone does, like, sort of call you out on mis-sequencing that and saying you missed your Channel or you missed your Arsenal or whatever. So just keep that in mind. Opponent CNCs when we have a direct in Arsenal was obviously the worst thing ever. But we have Oasis Respite with tuning up, so that feels good. So we could just block with like a Cold Snap, and then like tuning out Oasis Respite. Huh. Yeah, right. But the reason I went for this play is because it's more aggressive. Because now I can Ice Bolt and have an extra card to Waning Moon as well. So I'm presenting 5 damage instead of just 3. Because if I did block with a Cold Snap and then tuning out Oasis Respite, they can... like, I would only be threatening 3 damage instead of 5. And our opponent drew all reds, so at this point they just conceded. Which is interesting because we have a D-React in our arsenal, so we couldn't threaten damage in that turn, but we still have Striders up. So yeah, at this point they're like, you know what, it's over because I'll also be keeping Channel. Oh wait, no, that was the reason why I did this play. I blocked with Coronet Peak and Tunic Respite, is so I can have two ice cards in a pit zone, keep the Channel around, and then and that really just like cinches the deal, especially since we have Striders up. Also Metacarpus note, if we draw like another blue Ice Bolt or something with the Metacarpus and Waning Moon, we can still present another 7. So our opponent just goes ahead and concedes to us. So yeah, that was the game. Briar, definitely tricky matchup. For me personally, I think Briar is the most difficult of the aggro decks, like between Viscerai, Fi, and Briar. I think Briar is the one that causes me the most issues. Yeah, so you know, any practice I get into Briar, I do try and take. And yeah, the matchup was very interesting. I had a game at Nationals where I actually, I was in a spot against Briar where I actually had to Storm Striders out a blue Brain Freeze. Just to stop like a snatch that's going to come in for 10 because they had a Channel Mount Heroic on the field and they did a +3 buff on it. And I knew what the hand was because they hit a Tome of the Arknight, so I knew that it was going to be a snatch. So I did a blue Brain Freeze, which triggered my Insidious Chill, and obviously I could put a snatch back on top. And that was off Storm Striders, so... I feel like Briar, there's more situations where Briar forces me in that sort of situation because they are less fragile to disruption, it feels like, compared to like Fi, where they have all these 2 blocks, and also they have fewer blues than like Briar, so yeah, that's been my problem with Briar. So yeah, that was the game. Thank you for watching, and hope you enjoyed it.